Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the review and recap series for the crime and punishment topic. In this video we're looking at the nature and extent of crime since 1900 up until today. Now normally when we look at a new time period to do with crime, we start by analysing the crime rates. However, there are several problems with looking at the crime rates during this particular time period for different reasons. The first problem with looking at crime rates during this time period is that some crimes are not reported because they're dealt with by parents. The second problem is that some crimes are actually reported more during different parts of this time period. For example, burglaries. When insurance companies started making people report burglaries to the police before they would pay out for insurance claims, you see the number of burglaries suddenly skyrocket because more people are having to report them. Number three, some crimes are no longer illegal sort of halfway through this time period. For example, suicide is no longer considered a crime in 1961, abortion is no longer a crime in 1967, and homosexuality is also no longer a crime in 1967. So some crimes are removed from those crime statistics. Number four, you also get some new crimes during this time period. For example, smoking in public in an enclosed space was outlawed in 2007, so that adds to the crime statistics because it wasn't considered before. And then lastly, the systems change. So as we entered into the age of the computer, statistics were recorded on computers rather than on paper, so that again creates problems with analysing crime rates during this time. We can look at some general trends though for crime rates at the start of this period. Between 1920 and 1930, crime rose significantly due to the economic hardship. The world was going through the Great Depression because of the stock market collapsing in America, which had a knock-on effect in Europe. So economic hardship led to poverty, which led to crime. During World War II itself, crime also rose because there was looting of homes, businesses, and even dead bodies that had been destroyed or killed during the war. And you also get the rise of the black market, which is where people would illegally buy and sell goods because of rationing. Crime rates do rise again after 1955, but new laws help to control these. So let's have a look at some of the crimes that are new to this time period. Well, one of the new crimes is to do with car crime. In 1896, the first person is caught speeding at 8 miles an hour. This, of course, is just before our time period, but car crime does pick up as we progress. For example, you get drink driving in 1967, where the government limit the amount of alcohol you can have in your bloodstream while driving for the first time. There's the compulsory wearing of seatbelts in 1991. Roadside cameras are put up for speeding in 1992. And road deaths, all of these new laws have led to road deaths falling since 1960, and thefts also reducing during the 1990s because of the sort of better technology in cars. So one new crime that you could talk about is the car crimes. You could also talk about football hooliganism. This really peaked in its era in the 1970s and 1980s. For example, Liverpool at Hayes Hill Stadium when they played Juventus in the 1985 European Cup final. A riot led to part of a wall collapsing which killed 39 spectators. However, nowadays much more CCTV and crowd control has been brought in to try and limit this football hooliganism at match days. You also get the new crimes of drug offences. So the problems with drugs in Britain rose in World War I because soldiers were often prescribed morphine, which is like a form of heroin, and cocaine to deal with the pain, which of course led to addictions. And you also get rising drug offences in the 1960s because of the cultural and music scene of that time. This, of course, has a knock-on effect because increased drug offences means that other crimes are more likely to occur. The government tackled this in 1971 when they make classifications under a new drug law for different types of drugs. So you get Class A, Class B and Class C drugs, and the various punishments for being in possession and supplying those drugs depends on what class they are in. However, the war on drugs is still continuing today, and that's largely because the police and law enforcement are having issues dealing with legal highs. Legal highs are like a synthetic mix of chemicals that induce a high in somebody, but they're really hard to trace amongst the police, and they're really hard to clamp down on because they're popping up all of the time. You also get another new crime, which is cybercrime, with the creation of computers and the internet. In the 1990s, the internet creates problems such as phishing, which is where people would send out emails sort of asking for personal details to then get money or information from them. You get hacking, where organized hackers are targeting big websites and holding them to ransom for money. And you also get illegal downloading of music, films, games, etc. Now, in 2015, cybercrime is for the first time included in national crime statistics. That means that in the 2015 crime rate, it suddenly shoots up to the fact that it's double what it was in 2014. And now that does not mean that necessarily more crime was occurring in 2015, although if you looked at the statistics, it would look like there was twice as much crime. It's just that for the first time, cybercrime is being counted and included in statistics. So that links back to that first point that I was talking about with problems with crime rates in this time. This new crime is added to those statistics, so it kind of skews the data. And finally, the last of the new crimes that we're going to look at are what are called hate crimes. Now, you get the government passing a series of laws called the Race Relations Act in 1965, 68 and 76 to try and tackle discrimination and to remove prejudice in workplaces, education and the private sector. However, if we skip to the bottom bullet point, the problems with racial tension are perhaps best exemplified with the tragic case of the Stephen Lawrence murder in 1993, when a 19-year-old black male was murdered in the street by a group of white males purely because of the colour of his skin. That horrifies and shocks Britain, and it's a really long, drawn-out legal process, and it took 19 years for those murderers to be brought to justice. During that time, we get the 1998 and 2003 hate crime laws, which are there to try and protect victims based on their identities, whether it's to do with ethnicity, race, religion, sexual orientation, gender. So that is now a new specific category of crime. So that is another example of how crime has changed during this time. That just about wraps up this episode. In the next episode, we'll be looking at the changing nature of law enforcement since 1900.